Working with Lincoln College on the Mitre project has been a fantastic experience for me and for TSH Architects, and we've enjoyed really getting stuck into the history of the buildings and learning an awful lot about the buildings and about the development of central Oxford. And being on the high street, it's sort of like a microcosm of all the different types of building you get in Oxford, and the connection with the college has been brilliant because they're allowing us, with their sort of long-term stewardship of these buildings, to take a really long-term view and to look after these buildings for future generations. So we're up in one of the rooms in Turl Yard, and this is a great spot to get a view of the whole site. From here you can see the covered market, you can see Turl Yard buildings, backs of Turl Street, up to the Mitre, and you can see the tower of Lincoln College Library as well in the background. So this is one of the accessible rooms where we've recreated the original details of the door from this part of the building, but made the doors wider to make the rooms accessible for students. And we've got accessible bathrooms going in as well.
So I'm an architectural historian, and I really like looking at old buildings and trying to work out how they've changed over time. And then sort of on top of that, I really like trying to work out what's the most significant part of a building and why that might be. Being involved in the Mitre project has been really, really interesting. It's an incredibly old and complicated collection of buildings, which has got remains from the medieval period right through to the 20th century, with sort of everything in between. And it's got really nice remains. So it's got really lovely 18th century panelling, and it's got really lovely 17th century stucco-clad beams. So they're quite, relatively unusual things to find in these buildings, and things like 17th century stone fireplaces, which are beautifully preserved. And you don't get that in every building that you look at.
So this is one of my favourite rooms in the Mitre site. It's an absolutely beautiful room, and it's full of 17th century panelling, which is completely gorgeous, and I love it. It's also got a stucco-clad beam, which is just above us here, which has got a decorative pattern of pomegranates on it, which I think it's just so lovely, and it's so handmade and crafted, and that also dates to possibly the late 16th or the early 17th century. But one of the things I really love about this room is the fact that it's layers of history on top of each other. So you've got 17th century panelling, there's an early 18th century chimney piece. So when you look in the corner, you can see that the panelling has been cut. It's been lifted off of somewhere else, and it's been cut to fit the space where it's been now put. And I just think this is a really interesting room.
We've been on site for over a year now, and Benfield and Loxley have been running the building site, and it's been really interesting to see how they've managed to work on such a constrained site, because we've only got really small points of access, so everything's had to be sort of hand carried into the site. We haven't had a crane, we can't get much vehicular movement down Turl Street, so it's been a real challenge but a really interesting job. There's always lots of people on site doing all sorts of interesting different things, and I've been down on site sort of twice a week for the best part of a year, and every time you come something's slightly different. So because of the work going on, they might have blocked off one particular route that you were used to using around the site, and now you have to go a different way, or you have to go up a different ladder to get somewhere, and it was always a difficult building to find your way around, so that's been a challenge, but hopefully by the time we've finished it will be a much more usable, legible site. So the roofs are a great reflection of the history of the building, and they're all different ages of fabric. So the idea is to repair these into a state where they'll last for another 50, 100 years, because it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to replace as much as we can.
So this is one of the rooms that's got the really lovely stone fire surrounds, which probably dates to the late 16th century. When we first came here, somebody probably in the Victorian period had hacked off all of the plasterwork around the chimney breast and the flue up here. So one of the things that we've done is to restore that so that it looks much more closely as to how it would have looked. And this is all done with a lime-based render, which is stiffened with chopped animal hair. And it goes off very, very slowly, so you can see it's still slightly wet in here. So you could definitely roll a marble down this floor. And throughout the building, the floors are extremely wonky and very deflected. But one of the nice things about the floor in here is that there's some really early floorboards, which are probably late 17th or early 18th century. Now that might not sound like much, but those floorboards are actually quite rare and unusual.
As we've been sort of taking parts of the building apart, opening things up, we found all sorts of things, bits of old newspapers, we found an ancient Coke can, and we've also found, like, on the 3rd floor, we found sections of a bike. So we don't know how that got up there or who put it in there, but it was actually behind the plaster of the wall. So who knows what was going on there. In terms of what's been most enjoyable to work on with the project, apart from all the historic fabric, there's been a great mixture of people, tradesmen working on the site, and it's been really good to see them and to see them transform the building over time.